I sent a white cop to jail. I was a hero that day, but I was a target that night. A prominent civil rights attorney, Andre Miller, 42, had tried dozens of cases involving racial injustice, but this one was different. He had just secured the conviction of a white police officer in the wrongful death of a young black man. As he left the courthouse, reporters surrounded him. Applause rose. People were proud of him, because his defense in court had been incredible. Some shouted, "Justice served," but Andre just bowed his head and walked silently to his car. He didn't even smile. What he felt was not triumph, but uneasiness, as if he were aware of something. It was late at night. Andre was alone, driving home, exhausted, but proud. Just a few blocks later, he saw a black car in his rearview mirror that had been following him for a while. At first, he thought it was just a coincidence. But with every turn he made, the car turned too. The distance between them was almost non-existent, and there was no reason not to be suspicious. His heart began to pound. He reached for his phone, but didn't call. His suspicion was turning to something else, something real. This wasn't traffic. This was a warning. Andre glanced in the mirror once more. The headlights were still there. That court victory had been the pinnacle of his career. But tonight, he might have entered the darkest night of his life. Andre tried to stay calm as he pulled over on a quiet, empty street. Maybe they would have passed, but they didn't. The car stopped right behind him. Two men got out. They were dressed in civilian clothes, but one had a gun clearly visible on his belt. "Good evening, Mr. Miller. Do we look familiar?" one of them asked, smiling and mocking. Andre recognized them immediately. They were officers with bad records, men he had deliberately left out on his last case. They were out of uniform tonight, but there was no authority in their eyes. There was a threat. "You're one of us, aren't you?" the other said. "Why are you fighting your own people?" Andre swallowed. He tried to stay calm, but everything inside was frozen. This wasn't a courthouse. There were no rules here, only threats backed up by guns. "I did the right thing," he said quietly, but fear was building inside him. One of the men leaned against the window of Andre's car. "Do it again, and you might not make it home next time." Andre arrived home that night, but nowhere felt safe anymore. He looked in the mirror. Behind the fear on his face, something else was growing. Determination. This threat had to be documented. It was time to reveal the truth. He pulled himself together and promised, "My fight is not over." The morning light filtered through Andre's kitchen window, but sleep had barely touched his eyes. Instead of making coffee or scanning news headlines, he focused on one thing: setting up the hidden camera in his car. It was no ordinary setup. The lens was sleek, discreet, nestled below the dashboard, with a direct view of both the driver's seat and the window. The audio feed was crisp, and most importantly, it could not be jammed. He triple-checked the system. This time, there would be no "he said," "she said." There would be proof. And in Andre's world, proof was power. Day 1 passed without incident. Then day 2. He almost began to doubt they'd come back. But on the third night, as the city skyline faded in his rearview mirror, a chill ran down his spine. There it was again. That same black car. No plates on the front, tinted windows, hugging his bumper like a shadow. Only this time, Andre didn't feel fear. He felt something deeper, a calm rage, the kind that doesn't flinch, because it's been waiting. He didn't accelerate. He didn't swerve. Instead, he turned onto an isolated road leading out of town, a place where streetlights thinned and silence thickened. The black car followed, headlights flashing once, twice. Andre pulled over. Doors slammed behind him. Two men emerged. One made a direct path toward the driver's side window. The other circled the car slowly, his hand resting heavily on the roof, as if marking territory. "You still don't get it, do you?" said the first, his tone colder than before. "You embarrassed one of our own in court. That doesn't just go away." Andre kept his hands visible on the steering wheel, breathing steady, eyes locked on the dashboard where the lens blinked silently. The second man spoke now, his voice low and smug. "You trust the system. That's cute. But we are the system. We don't play by your rules. We write them." Andre didn't reply. The silence spoke louder. The man closest to him leaned down, peering into the window with a smirk. "If your face doesn't show up in tomorrow's press, that'd be for the best. You've stirred enough noise." Back at home, Andre sat in the dark, lit only by the glow of his laptop. His fingers trembled slightly as he reviewed the footage. Crystal clear. Their voices, their threats, their faces, their license plate numbers, all captured. There was no denying it now. This wasn't just intimidation. It was organized retaliation. The camera hadn't just recorded a crime, it had caught the rot within the system. And Andre? He was done being quiet. By dawn, Andre's resolve had crystallized. He packaged the footage into secured files and sent them to every contact he could think of: internal affairs, the district attorney, local media outlets, even national civil rights watchdogs. Each email was brief, professional, and attached with hard evidence. Then he waited. Hours ticked by. No one called. By late afternoon, Andre noticed the change. First, a dark SUV parked across the street. Its engine hummed softly. Then another. They didn't knock. They didn't move. They just watched. Silent reminders that the walls were closing in. He drew the curtains and sat alone in his study. The legal system he had dedicated his life to. Silent. The institutions he had trusted. Silent. But the footage, it screamed the truth. So Andre made a choice. If the system wouldn't speak, he would. That night, he uploaded the footage himself. He chose no flashy thumbnails, no narration, just the raw video. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. Millions of views on YouTube. Activist groups issued statements. Celebrities tweeted. Andre's phone buzzed non-stop, but so did the pressure. A police spokesperson held a press conference, their tone defensive but polished. Mr. Miller's accusations are baseless and harmful. The matter is under internal review. They tried to cast doubt, but the public wasn't buying it. The footage was too raw, too real. People saw what Andre saw, and this time, they believed him. That same night, a knock echoed through Andre's hallway. It was Camille Ross, known for dismantling systemic abuses with surgical precision. Camille didn't offer comfort. She offered clarity. "We've crossed a line now," she said quietly. "They threatened you to send a message, but the message they sent is louder than they intended. And I'm with you, every step of the way." Andre finally exhaled. Not from relief, but recognition. This wasn't just his burden to carry anymore. It was a movement, a reckoning, and this time, he wasn't standing alone. The courthouse steps were crowded. Cameras flashed, reporters took positions. Civil rights activists, law students, and fellow attorneys all gathered for one reason: Andre's trial. This wasn't just about one man anymore. It had become the voice of a community. But this time, Andre wasn't in the defendant's seat. He was the plaintiff. Across the courtroom sat the two plainclothes officers and representatives of the department they worked for. You could hear a pin drop. Attorney Camille Ross faced the jury and spoke with conviction. A man who simply stood up for justice was hunted for it. Everything is here, on camera. Threats, intimidation, and a coordinated attempt to silence him. Justice isn't blind. It just chooses when to look away. Then, the footage played. The officers' threats, their faces, their license plates. The jury stared at the screen, motionless. The defense team first claimed the videos were fabricated. Then they leaned into a familiar excuse. It was just a misunderstanding, more of a friendly joke. The room was still, until Camille stood up again. If that was a joke, why is it always our lives that get laughed away? The judge raised the gavel and brought it down. The officers are hereby removed from duty. An internal investigation into the department will proceed. The plaintiff is awarded both financial and emotional damages. A soft applause grew into a standing ovation. Andre bowed his head slightly. His eyes welled up, but he didn't cry. He smiled, just once. Outside the courthouse, a reporter leaned in with a mic. "Mr. Miller, any final words?" Andre turned toward the camera. His voice was clear, calm, but powerful. "I only won a case, but I nearly lost my life after it. If these cameras hadn't been rolling, I might not be standing here today. That's why we must always document our truth, because some realities refuse to be silenced."